Republican lawmakers are going after the far left's response to anti-ICE riots continuing in Los Angeles. Senator Tom Cotton of the great state of Arkansas reportedly sent a memo to colleagues saying this gives us an opportunity to remind Americans how extreme the Democratic Party is on immigration. Well, he's not wrong. The riots broke out after ICE arrested illegal immigrants in Los Angeles. Those sweeps took some of the worst off the streets, just what President Trump said he would do. Illegals with convictions for murder, sexual battery, burglary, and more. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries seemed to brush it off his shoulder.
Do you support ICE detaining illegal immigrants that have criminal histories and backgrounds?
The Department of Homeland Security, under the leadership of the so-called Secretary Kristi Noem, is a complete and total embarrassment. If they were proud of what they are doing, why are they masked? This isn't the 1930s. Why are they masked?
Does he not know they've been targeted? Senior correspondent for Congress, Chad Pergram, is on Capitol Hill for us now. Chad.
Harris, good morning. Well, Jeffries would not say whether they should detain illegal immigrants with criminal records. Los Angeles area Democrats accuse President Trump of trying to inflame matters by sending in federal agents and troops. Some Democrats are ignoring the unrest.
You all don't think that somehow, because they called out the National Guard, there was violence. There was no violence. I was on the street.
Now, when asked about Waters' comments, House Speaker Mike Johnson said, quote, "Bless her heart." There is concern about deploying the U.S. military on domestic soil. California Governor Gavin Newsom did not call for troops. President Trump did. Democrats contend the administration is trying to escalate matters. He worries about the precedent and what could go wrong.
We are in very, very dangerous territory. If we screw up the balance of how we use the Guard or how we use the military in the instance of civilian protests that local law enforcement can handle, we will regret that for a very, very long time.
Border issues and illegal immigration are the top reasons Democrats stumbled in the 2024 elections. Republicans are marching in lockstep with the president.
To keep Americans safe. And by the way, if you're a citizen of the state of California, while your governor is failing you miserably, at least we have a president in Donald Trump who is willing to say that he will step up and try to protect those same people, law-abiding people who are sick and tired of the lawlessness.
Now, Johnson said he was not sure whether Newsom should face arrest, but he says Newsom should certainly be, quote, tarred and feathered. Harris?
All right, Chad, thank you.
This was a fascinating Oval Office interaction, some chess moves going on. First, there was the very subtle policy contrast. This was an event about wildfires, about the outlook, the highly likely event that there will be more wildfires after those California wildfires that we covered back in January. So a policy contrast with the state of California, subtle one, turned into an overt political contrast. President Trump made the pivot, made the segue, and said, had I not intervened with the National Guard, we would be seeing L.A. burn today like it was burning because of the wildfires. He called Gavin Newsom an incompetent man, an incompetent governor. We know that Gavin Newsom and President Trump spoke on Friday for about 20 minutes. He said that during that phone call, he told Governor Gavin Newsom he was doing a bad job and then proceeded to send in the National Guard. Now, Governor Gavin Newsom has said that the protest barely came up in the Friday phone call. We'll have that clip for you in just a moment. But what I find fascinating about this, Brian, is the Truth Social that came out this morning, because it was a wildfire Truth Social, also tied into a protest one, and he echoed many of the same points. He said, much like the 25,000 houses burned to the ground in L.A. due to an incompetent governor and mayor, he said if he wouldn't have sent in the troops, that would have happened again. And then he goes into the permitting process, saying that the federal permitting to rebuild after the wildfire has gone through. The state permitting process has been slow. So really interesting juxtapositions.
Couple of things. Remember, he sat there with Karen Bass and he says, let's get started today. He goes, we have to do it right. We got to be safe. He goes, we're safe. Let them get started. And now here we are 8 months later. They haven't gotten started. Only a handful of permits. It's just symbolic of what's going on in blue cities. One half is burned to the ground, and one is full of riots in the process of being burned to the ground. You make your choice. And he's just saying to the governor, it just came out when Pete Hegseth is testifying while this was going on. He said it's going to cost about $134 million to have the National Guard there. Okay, $134 million. California should pay for it because you will not control your city. You can't control your the behavior of your citizens and most illegal immigrants. Why are we paying for it?
Yeah, and Harris, the one reporter question that it almost made me laugh. He said, are you concerned that this is going to get out of hand? Insinuating that Trump sending the National Guard would make something get out of hand. At least that's how I heard the question, where the National Guard is going in there to quell the situation from getting out of hand. In fact, I remember hearing General Milley on a phone call with governors back during 2020 say, we have data, we have studies that show the National Guard actually helps in these situations.
Yeah, we have video to show people what was going on before they got there. I don't think that's bad for them to have watched either. I mean, the point that you're making is a good one, and that is a battle cry on the left about how you're not allowed to help because we got it all. And then on the other hand, you've got people like Representative Maxine Waters, who's 86 and is in her 18th term, a really good argument for term limits, talking directly to the National Guard's troops who are there, saying, you know, if you try to shoot me or a politician or a kid out there, you better shoot straight at me. I mean, what is that about? There's so much nonsense going on the left around this issue. That's her state. She can't go meet with some particularly minority businesses that are being burned to the ground and having most of these problems. Senator Blackburn said that the last hour. She can't go help solve some people's problems or at least listen to their concerns within communities that are losing their small businesses and their houses. No, they have to fight and complain about Trump. This is the Democratic Party.
Emily, I do want to play Governor Gavin Newsom earlier in the week. Here's what he said about that phone call we heard Trump mention, where he said he called Governor Gavin Newsom, told him he was doing a bad job. Listen to Newsom. It's not working. I was told we had it. We're working on it, Emily. But, you know, you've got this back and forth, and you have one person, Newsom, who's tried to make this entirely about President Trump. And interesting, on the heels of President Trump laying out a policy intended to help the people of Governor Gavin Newsom's state on the issue of wildfires.
Yeah, and look, part of what we learned during this really informative presser was that, first of all, our disaster funding right now is flush and funded. $13 billion we are ready for this season. That was even before the hurricane comments. This was about wildland fires specifically. And to learn that we are burning more timber than harvesting, that for every dollar that we reap from harvesting, we are spending $100 either on woefully inadequate fire prevention or in those losses. You know, for me as a Californian, who I have so many friends that are still out of their homes in the LA fires, like we've talked about, fighting with insurance adjusters, flying in, going in all the time, hours on the phone, trying to get funding. That's Governor Gavin Newsom's watch. I have friends from Northern California that are still absolutely decimated from the prior fires. To accept this as somehow a way of life, a seasonal existence, blaming it on climate change, but ignoring the human element of mismanagement, just such incompetence. And to have this governor continue to make it all about Trump and continue to make it all about his attention-seeking tweets and his sound bites is so infuriating to me. The people that have lost their lives in those fires, the people that continue to struggle under his watch while he looks in the mirror and pats himself on the back is just absolutely unacceptable. And I hope moving forward that in the weaning away from FEMA and in the weaning away from these incompetent governors, we're going to see who separates from the wheat from the chaff, who can't handle actual gubernatorial existence in their government and their governance of these states, because I think it's pretty clear that Gavin Newsom can't cut it.
Well, here he is. We do have his characterization of the call. Listen to this.
Have you spoken in the last couple of days to the president about any of this?
Yeah, we talked for almost 20 minutes, and this issue never came up. I kept trying to talk about L.A. He wanted to talk about all these other issues. We had a very decent conversation.
When was this?
This was late Friday night, I think about 1:30 plus his time.
After the protests had started here?
After the protests, and he never once brought up the National Guard. He's a stone-cold liar. He said he did. Stone-cold liar. Never did.
Harsher words for Trump than the protests. We also, that was the Friday call. There could have been another call since then. I just want to point that out. But he has harsher words for President Trump than he does for the rioters.
Well, I think a big part of this, though, is that
This is very embarrassing for Gavin Newsom, and it's after a string of embarrassments. You look at all these different Democrat policies that are under dispute nationally, and they're best epitomized in California, whether it's how to handle a homeless population. Do you encourage it or do you discourage it? California encourages it, and they deal with all of that. All of their horrible wildfire preparation. You know, they get a lot of, Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom get a lot of criticism for how they responded to that fire, but really the bigger criticism is how they failed to prepare for that fire. And then you look at all of the riots, the cartel riots, and what they're doing to encourage cartel activity in California. You know, California is a state where you basically can only afford to live there if you're extremely wealthy or if you're illegal. And they've kind of hollowed out the middle class. So when people look at what they don't like about Democrat policies, they look at California and they think Gavin Newsom, and that scares him heading into a primary.
You know, Brian, and I would just say, having listened to President Trump make many phone calls to many different governors, world leaders, President Trump's not a wallflower. He's not someone who sits there as a city burns and just doesn't speak up.
He's going to do it. And like I said, I think that he really adjusted from the first term. He said, I held back. A lot of people consulted him to let Minneapolis handle Minneapolis, let Seattle and Portland handle it. And this time he's like, no, we're not going to do it. He's also sending a message to Chicago, Dallas, Philadelphia, all these others that, yeah, you might. And by the way, I hear there might be heating something. If they're heating something up for this weekend, that we're going to come down. We're going to come down hard. And if you have a police force, I like what Eric Adams said yesterday. He said, don't think it just New York is going to tolerate what's happening in Los Angeles.
100%.
Yep, and President Trump made clear today, if there was an interruption, I would invoke the Insurrection Act. I believe that was the first question. That was his response. So, word of warning ahead of this weekend. Yeah. We're outnumbered in just a moment.
Let's bring in Los Angeles business owner and LAFD honorary fire chief Paul Scrivino. Paul, good morning to you. So how do people who aren't rioting in Los Angeles right now feel about these riots?
Good morning, Carly. Good morning, Todd. We're sick and tired of it. We have no one in charge. I would go so far as to say we have children in charge of Los Angeles right now. Look, I know you guys. I know you guys are watched by the White House. I know President Trump is watching this show right now. I want to talk to President Trump and to Pete Hegseth and to Kristi Noem and to people that were elected in November to change this. I'm telling you now, you're losing Los Angeles. The people in charge have lost all control of the emergency services here in Los Angeles. Ports, airports, nothing is protected. We really need that help to come in here. We've lost complete control. You see the pictures. We don't have to talk about the pictures. It's the people that are in charge have zero respect for tax-paying citizens anymore. They are giving it all to these paid out-of-state. I don't even know where these people are from. I would say 3% of them are actually illegal immigrants that are protesting. It's got to end, and the only person who can do this is Donald Trump. The people in charge of Los Angeles are all activists, social justice warriors, out with an agenda. I believe with all the message that I was able to get out, we got the DEI fire chief fired, and I thought that was a great thing. But there's so many other people in place in the city of Los Angeles, in the city council. The city controller is a First Amendment auditor. The city controller, I believe, had one of his staff's daughters arrested. One of our council members, the one who you may have heard use the words mobilize and troops, Ulysses Hernandez. She's out of control. These are the people that are in charge right now. We have a...
Paul, are you there?
I am here.
I think he just dropped out a little bit, but he was making a fiery point. Paul, do we have you back?
I'm here.
All right, please continue your point.
I was just going to say the mayor is not only an incompetent executive, but she has appointed incompetent, again, social activists, social justice warriors. I'm going to give you a quick, specific example. I advocate for the fire department and the rights of firefighters. I'm not a firefighter. I'm a firefighter feeder. And I spend a lot of time in those guys' kitchens, and I hear all their problems. I go to the fire commission. I complain for them. At the last meeting on Tuesday, Carly, the fire commissioner, Janitha Hudley-Hayes, on a hot mic, called me an idiot when I walked in her room, told me to shut up, thinking no one heard, but it was on a hot mic. I sent you the tape.
So, Paul,
that's how they treat people
Yeah, I understood your point. And I just want to ask you about any differences you've seen when it comes to the first 3 nights versus last night, because night 4 of these riots saw for the first time the presence of the Marines and the National Guard. Do you think that made a difference in terms of how the riots played out last night?
I was asleep, ready for this morning. So I saw National Guard troops. I saw them on the streets myself. These people don't care. The only way it's going to stop is if many troops come in, round them up, put them in the back of trucks, and bring them into a cell. We got a lot of empty jail cells here in Los Angeles. We need to put them in jail cells, as many as we possibly can. If it's thousands, it's thousands. Send them back to where they came from. Detroit, St. Louis, wherever they came from. They're not from LA. And that's how we have to get rid of this. The police here are in the 7,000s now. 7,000, Ellie.
Right, understood.
The Sheriff's Department, who is in charge of protecting those troops, is in the 6,000s now.
Understood.
It's horrible.
Hey, Paul, we're having a little bit of trouble with your audio, so I'm going to leave it there with you. And, you know, Karen Bass held a press conference yesterday. The very last thing that she said was stop the raids, not stop the riots, stop the raids, which are seeing the arrests of criminal illegal immigrants, including one who shot and killed 2 teenagers at a graduation party. So these are the riots that are playing out right now. A lot of those rioters are carrying Mexican flags and flags of other foreign countries as they are demanding to stay in ours. We will see how night 5 plays out tonight with the presence of the Marines and National Guard as well. Paul Scavino, thank you so much for hopping on this morning and joining us. We appreciate it. Division among the Democrats. Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman condemning the violent anti-ICE protests in L.A., posting on X, quote, I unapologetically stand for free speech, peaceful demonstrations, and immigration, but this is not that. This is anarchy and true chaos. My party loses the moral high ground when we refuse to condemn setting cars on fire, destroying buildings, and assaulting law enforcement.
But House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries trying to pass blame onto the Republicans.
The Department of Homeland Security, under the leadership of the so-called Secretary Kristi Noem, is a complete and total embarrassment. And so anything that they put out should be scrutinized through that lens.
Nonetheless, is that something that you would agree with?
I've made my statement on this issue.
Here to react, Fox News contributor Joe Concha. Joe, your #1 job as an elected official is public safety. That's it. Every other issue is a far distant second. So why can't all Democrats, especially their so-called leader, Hakeem Jeffries, say what Fetterman said right there?
John Fetterman, again, being the voice of reason in the Democratic Party, Todd, and he'll probably have some hit pieces now written about his health, I would imagine, as a result, because the Democrats are not very happy with Mr. Fetterman right now. Look, I'm glad that Hakeem Jeffries was asked that question. What these protests, these fiery but mostly peaceful riots are about, and this is getting lost here a little bit in all the media coverage, is the Trump administration attempting to deport those here illegally, very key to mention that, here illegally, who have committed murder, including of children, of rapists, of child molesters. I mean, this is an effort that almost all sane and sober Americans support, yet Democrats are imploring their fringe supporters to resist. They won't condemn the violence, the attacks on law enforcement, only President Trump and ICE. Meanwhile, the media, Dana Bash on CNN saying these aren't, quote, real riots, unquote. Well, look at your television screens over the last 5 days. Chris Murphy, senator of Connecticut, goes on MSNBC and is telling people to take to the streets in other cities. Therefore, more riots across the country. 2020 all over again. Kamala Harris saying that it has been overwhelmingly peaceful in Los Angeles. My goodness gracious. If you live in California, why would you ever stay in that state, given the way that it is run, because Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass are in charge? We are witnessing political suicide of the Democratic Party, to John Fetterman's point, in real time. They have lost the moral high ground, and they can't lecture about enforcing the law and the laws in the books ever again if they are not condemning this the way they should.
Yeah, Joe, I mean, you said it. It's remarkable how similar what's taking place right now is to 5 years ago. I mean, if you played footage of last night's riot and asked somebody who didn't know when that took place, they would have said that was the Black Lives Matter riot of 2020. And during that time, Democrats continued to say that they were mostly peaceful protests. And here we go again.
Oh, boy. Here we go
to
again.
imagine
I mean, that's the thing.
that this time the National Guard were sent out to attack protesters that were exercising their constitutional obligation.
We don't take lightly to the president abusing his authority and unlawfully mobilizing California National Guard troops.
They're not criminals, and that is the outrage that you're seeing. And I think that if ICE left, I think if the National Guard left, you would see this all die down.
And we just lived through the ramifications of those remarks 5 years ago with the results of the 2024 presidential elections. So has the party learned any lessons in that time period?
Obviously not. I mean, I can't believe these sound bites that you guys are playing where Seattle, for example, because the mayor there in 2020, the one that said it was the summer of love, when you had far left rioters took over major blocks of a major NFL city in this country, including the police station. Portland police were under siege for months by so-called protesters, literally launching firebombs at the police station. If the National Guard was called in then, that would have quelled those situations a lot faster. So President Trump, learning from that, saying, all right, I'm not waiting for a governor or mayor to tell me what I have to do here. I'm going to do, to Todd's original point, I'm going to do what I can to protect American citizens and put violent criminals out of this country who entered illegally. Again, this is absolute Thelma and Louise off the cliff suicide here that we are seeing from the Democratic Party and those in the media who are cheering it on, because the pictures tell the story just like they did with Joe Biden in 2024 when we were told that he really wasn't seeing his brain turn to applesauce, and they kept calling it cheap fake videos. These are not cheap fake. That is an assault on law enforcement, and when you see rocks and concrete blocks being dropped on their cars, someone's going to get killed. Unless something is done, President Trump is trying to do that.
Yeah, and to that point, I just want to be very clear to contradict something that the California Attorney General, Rob Bonta, said. He said this is an illegal use of the National Guard. That is incorrect. And even the most far-left legal professor, he now runs a law school, Dean Erwin Chemerinsky, said that President Trump's use of that code section in the United States Code to call out the National Guard when the governor fails to do so is completely legal and viable. That tells you everything you need to know. This is posturing on behalf of the California AG, and he's wrong legally.
Right, yeah, and Joe, we got to let you go, but to that point, Alex Villanueva was on Brian Kilmeade's One Nation show on Sunday. He's the former LA County Sheriff, and he said that the order of events is that ICE was under attack. They appealed to LAPD and the Los Angeles County Sheriff, and they were denied backup. So then they went to the feds, and that is how the National Guard and now the Marines are in Los Angeles as well. So this lawsuit now is playing out. We'll see how that one goes in the court and also the court of public opinion in the days to come. Joe, we do have to leave it there, though. Thank you so much for joining us.
As those riots are raging on night after night in Los Angeles, Democrats have one single talking point. You heard a little bit of it from Jonathan Hunt. They are sticking to it.
We are having an administration that's targeting peaceful protests.
A lot of these peaceful protests are being generated because the president of the United States is sowing chaos.
I've not heard of anybody being shot. I've not heard of anybody being killed. I've not heard of anybody being beaten. So I don't know what all this so-called violence is all about.
I'm worried about the safety of the people who are peacefully protesting.
The vast majority of protesters and demonstrators are peaceful. They're passionate.
One former Democratic strategist has this message for Dems.
I think the Democratic Party's kind of lost its mind. I think that you cannot tolerate that people are harming government property and harming federal officials executing the job that the president or the secretary of DHS or whomever has ordered them to do. Like, you just simply cannot do this.
Fox News contributor Jonathan Turley argues in a new piece, Democrats' rabid anti-ICE resistance in L.A. against Trump could backfire. The Wall Street Journal editorial board writes, Democrats make Stephen Miller's day. Soft-peddling disorder in the streets helps Trump's deportation agenda. Jason Chaffetz, Fox News contributor and former Republican congressman of Utah. You know, I appreciate the drill down there from the Wall Street Journal and others to politics, but what's at stake here really is our sovereignty as a nation and all those businesses and homes caught in the fray of people committing crimes in the streets of L.A.
Yeah, most of those media pundits, they fail to talk about the victims. They fail to talk about the people that actually live there and run businesses there that have to live in fear of the violence that is happening there. You have this criminal element that is massive, that needs to be apprehended and deported. For the Democrats to continue to say, oh, mostly peaceful, all you got to do is run this video. I mean, look at the looting that is going on here. That's somebody's actual business. This is how they make their livelihood. This is how they hire people. Do you want to go into work to that place on Saturday or Friday? You know, this is abhorrent. And all those people waving non-American flags, you know what? If that's the country that you love, say Mexico, then go home. And guess what? There's an app for that. You can do that. That's what you should do. Go home, go back to Mexico or these other countries if that's what you love.
Yeah, CBP Home. There is an app for that. While some Democrats are downplaying the riots as mostly peaceful, which is what you're talking about, others are blaming it all on President Trump. Watch.
All of the violence and the escalation is core to the Trump administration's authoritarian playbook.
Donald Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans are intentionally trying to inflame. They should be ashamed of themselves.
I think that if ICE left, I think if the National Guard left, you would see this all die down.
Oh, and former VP Kamala Harris has something to say, too. She says, quote, deploying the National Guard is a dangerous escalation meant to provoke chaos. It's all part of Trump administration's cruel, calculated agenda to spread panic and division, end of quote. Critics quickly hit back. Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas saying, no surprise that the most incompetent vice president in history stands with the illegal alien rioters. A Southern California sheriff called it an embarrassment. And Fox News contributor Guy Benson said the country really dodged a bullet in November. Jason.
Yeah, look, these are the same Democrats who deployed law enforcement to a beach to make sure you were wearing your COVID mask, for goodness sake.
Oh, my goodness.
And if they think that, if they forget that the National Guard and their highway patrol and the state police and ICE, they're the good guys. They're the ones that strap on their uniform, put the flag on their shoulder, take the risk of being deployed and being out there. They don't make that much money. We need to pay those people more. And then you got the teachers unions and others people out there saying these are the bad guys. I saw Randy Weingarten standing in the background. This isn't about teaching kids. There is a principle in the United States, Harris. It's called restitution. If you steal something, you have to pay for it. If you break a window, you have to pay for it and replace it. If you're here illegally, you got to go back to your country of origin. That's just the way it is. And if you break our laws, you got to serve that penalty and then be deported. Don't tell us that these are the bad guys. The good guys are wearing the uniforms, trying to protect people against. Look at what's going on there. This is. Yeah. I'm so proud that Donald Trump has actually taken this. It should happen earlier. I want to see more of it. They need to clean out those streets.
Well, look, real quickly, the politics of this. Why in the world do Democrats think that this is the issue that they can win on?
I think they have relied on that money, and I think they have relied on those constituents. I do not believe that you're telling me that there aren't people here illegally that aren't voting. Because if they weren't voters, they would not be spending all this time catering to them, making sure that the money continues to flow. And I think when they're able to do what they need to do, let's look at how they get all those gas masks. Let's look at how they get all those funds. Let's look at all the background. That's what we need law enforcement, places like the FBI, to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, you were the chairman of oversight on the Hill for years. Those are the pertinent questions that should be answered right now. How are they doing it? We had the same questions when they had like merch and gear coming across the border illegally a couple of years ago. Remember that? You and I were talking about this. Who's paying for all this? All right, Jason, great to start the show with you. Thank you so much.
Anti-ICE tensions entering the 5th day following the 4th night of violence in Los Angeles.
Rioters taking advantage of the chaos to vandalize and loot several high-end stores and businesses there. Some protesters even shooting fireworks at officers, setting cars on fire and blocking roads, highways. This is the National Guard and U.S. Marines prepare to move in to try and curtail some of the violence. Democrats on Capitol Hill are blaming President Trump. Listen.
Donald Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans are intentionally trying to inflame.
It's hard to imagine that this time the National Guard were sent out to attack protesters that were exercising their constitutional obligation.
They're not criminals, and that is the outrage that you're seeing. And I think that if ICE left, I think if the National Guard left, you would see this all die down.
Fox Team coverage. Max Gordon is live in Los Angeles for us. But first, to Chad Pergram with the latest from Capitol Hill. Chad?
John, good morning. Hakeem Jeffries is still demanding that ICE agents lose their masks. He tripled down on that yesterday. Democrats are blasting the Trump administration for how it's handled the violence, and they believe adding federal agents and the military inflames the situation.
DHS and ICE are emboldened by this administration. They are operating outside of constitutional bounds. They are denying congressional oversight, using chemical agents against members of Congress.
The optics of the border posed a serious problem for Democrats in the 2024 elections. This meltdown in L.A. is all about immigration policy. Republicans are mystified by the position of the Democrats.
Yeah, the left's position is don't arrest the bad guys and send them back to their country. Don't do that. Don't deport the bad guys. Let them stay here. And oh, by the way, in addition to that, let them riot and cause all kinds of problems in L.A. That makes no sense.
GOP Georgia Representative Mike Collins wants to make it a crime to block a highway or interstate. House Speaker Mike Johnson supports President Trump for sending in troops. Other GOP members are siding with the president after the unrest.
When you've lost control of the city like Mayor Bass has, you got to do something. And they put their own law enforcement in harm's way. You got people throwing bricks and concrete blocks. Those are deadly weapons. Everybody that's involved in that should have been charged with assault. They're burning police cars. I mean, you got to get control of the situation.
Now this comes as a Senate committee holds a hearing today on how Los Angeles is prepping for the 2026 World Cup and the 2028 Olympics. The violence could alter those plans or change perceptions. John?
Almost forgot about those two big events in the future. Chad Pergram for us.
In a big hearing today that was pre-scheduled before the violence in L.A.
Yeah, all right. Well, it's certainly going to have a different tone about it. Chad, thank you for the update. Appreciate it. Paul Perez is the president of the National Border Patrol Council. He joins us here in Washington, D.C. So we don't know what the future holds. Maybe the protesters are looking at this and saying, wow, there's a lot of overwhelming force out there. Maybe it doesn't behoove us to get out there. But I wanted to put up this video. We were talking about this just a moment ago. This is this person, this protester, throwing chunks of rock or broken up sidewalk or curb or whatever. And a lot of these are Border Patrol cars that are going by, Border Patrol SUVs. And we talk about the potential for injury. I mean, you're throwing what could be a deadly projectile at these officers, and you said that there's been an injury.
Yeah, there has. And this gentleman will be in custody, this scumbag, I should say.
Now, would we call him a gentleman?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. This scumbag will be in custody very soon. Look, the president sent the not messing around crew out there to get back law and order in Los Angeles because politics are playing a role. The mayor, the governor, they're not willing to do the job. So the president has to step up because he's not going to allow Los Angeles or any other city in the country to burn like any Democrat would allow it to burn. So we're out there. Our agents are on the ground. We're going to do the job to secure that city.
Yeah, I mean, we remember back in the early 1990s when President George H.W. Bush dispatched the National Guard during the Rodney King riots to help put down the violence in the city and stop the entire place from burning down. Pete Hegseth this morning at the House Appropriations Committee defended the use of the National Guard. This is what he said.
You asked about the situation in Los Angeles, and we believe ICE agents should be allowed to be safe in doing their operations, and we have deployed National Guard and the Marines to protect them in the execution of their duties, because we ought to be able to enforce immigration law in this country, unlike what Governor Walz did in 2020.
So the situation is that ICE is going through its law enforcement process, its mandate to get illegal criminal aliens out of the country. These are people who are wanted for crimes, people who already have a criminal record. And you've got people in Los Angeles, including the leadership on the political level, saying, no, 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 you can't do that. And then people come together on the streets, and it looks like there's a degree of organization to this because some truck drove by and dumped out a whole bunch of gas masks. That just doesn't happen spontaneously. So they're getting in the way of the federal government enforcing the law. And should the federal government have the ability to be able to put in whatever resources are necessary to protect their agents who are doing that?
100%. It's no surprise that they're out there apprehending these criminal aliens, because this is what President Trump campaigned on. Everybody knew exactly what we were going to do. We were going to go out there and we were going to fulfill his campaign promise to get these people off the streets. And they're doing that. And the politics is just getting in the way. It's rhetoric. These are paid agitators. They're not that organized on their own without being paid to go out there and just like you said, drop off gas masks and do everything they can. That's not something that low-life criminals just do. This is something that they're doing as a paid agitator, and they're going to pay for it. So our officers are out there enforcing the laws that Congress has put in place. So these Democrats, they have a duty, if they don't like the laws, change them. But they won't, because they want to continue this problem. They know that President Trump's not messing around. He's going to clean up the streets. He's going to take care of the border. He's going to take care of the interior, just like he said he was going to do. And he's doing it. Right.
So there are a lot of people, Mayor Karen Bass included, who think that this could be part of potentially a larger operation. One of the ladies of The View also saw it that way. Listen to this here.
Trump is militarizing that state as a test run, to make sure that he can do it in places like New York, that he can do it in other sanctuary cities. And so there is a plan to this, in my view. Mm-hmm. And I really think that there's no question that the LAPD, that has 9,000 police officers, could have handled this quite well.
Although, what did the LAPD police chief say?
He said they were overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we know the officers on the ground, they welcome the support from federal law enforcement, from the National Guard, because that's the only way they're going to take back the city, because these guys, if left alone, would completely destroy Los Angeles like they have in the past. Mm-hmm. They need us out there, and we're going to be out there.
And I mean, in terms of this potentially happening in other cities, if federal law enforcement officers are put at risk, regardless of where they are, whether it be L.A. or Chicago, Kansas City, or New York, or wherever, you would think that the federal government would have their back to protect life and limb.
100%. And this isn't the end of it. This is only the start. You know, they're going to be in cities that we know there are criminal aliens all over the country. President Biden allowed millions of people to come into the country unvetted, and these are a lot of those that are out there committing crimes that we're going after. We're going to remove them.
I mean, ultimately, is the Democratic goal here to stop ICE from doing what it's doing?
Yes, absolutely. Obstructionist. That's what they want to do. They don't want us to enforce the law. They don't want us to go out and round up these criminal aliens that are committing crimes in these communities, but we're going to do it.
Paul, great to see you. Thank you for dropping by.
Thank you.
Kicking us off.
Appreciate it.
Jason Miller is a former senior advisor to the Trump transition team. Megan Hayes, former director of message planning for the Biden White House. Just further to what Max was saying about Newsom's claim that the president never called him. As we showed a few minutes ago, the president sent me a note saying, yes, I did call him. He also sent me a picture of the call log to prove that he called them. We'll have that for you in just a couple of minutes. But first of all, let me go to this, because this is Hakeem Jeffries on the removal operations that ICE is undergoing. Listen here.
Do you support ICE detaining illegal immigrants that have criminal histories and backgrounds?
The Department of Homeland Security, under the leadership of the so-called Secretary Kristi Noem, is a complete and total embarrassment. And so anything that they put out should be scrutinized through that lens.
So he thinks the Department of Homeland Security under Kristi Noem is an embarrassment. what would that make it under the leadership of Alejandro Mayorkas, during which 10 million people came into this country illegally?
Look, I don't think that what Jeffries is saying is appropriate. I think that most Democrats here believe that illegal immigration needs to be handled. And Trump, this is what he campaigned on. This is what he voted for. This is not a surprise to the American people. It's not a surprise to Democrats. So I don't necessarily think insulting the Department of Homeland Security is the appropriate way to go. I do think, though, that two things can be true. And I think that either you're the Republican Party for states' rights or you're not. So calling in the National Guard and sending them to California is not appropriate either. So I think that we need to have some more common sense here, but I don't think Leader Jeffrey should be insulting Kristi Noem and the Department of Homeland Security when people do think that illegal immigration is out of control and needs to be handled.
All right, so you think that the federal government should observe states' rights. Well, what about 1965, where Lyndon Johnson didn't like what George Wallace was doing down in Alabama and sent in the National Guard against George Wallace's wishes?
Well, I think this is President Trump doing exactly what he said he was going to on the campaign trail. He said that he was going to reverse this. He was going to secure the border. He was going to send the 15 million plus. It was way bigger than 10 million, John. He was going to send the 15 million plus illegals back home. Now, here's the reason why President Trump is taking such action and why everybody, in my opinion, should be saying thank you to him. All of those criminal illegals that are in the country could be the next murderers of a Laken Riley, a Jocelyn Ungary, a Rachel Morin. These are some sick, savage, twisted people. And you see their activity. They're throwing cinder blocks and things like that. So President Trump is right to step in and get them sent home. And in fact, if you're a criminal illegal and you're protesting violently at one of these, starts as demonstration, turns into a riot, and you're wearing the flag for another country, they should treat that like a self-addressed stamped envelope. That's where you're getting sent back to. So
Kamala Harris decided that she wanted to weigh in on this, and she's getting ripped for it. Here's what she said. I am appalled at what we're witnessing on the streets of our city, L.A. Deploying the National Guard is a dangerous escalation meant to promote chaos. This administration's actions are not about public safety. They're about stoking fear. Fear of a community demanding dignity and due process. Protest is a powerful tool, essentially in the fight for justice. And as the LAPD, mayor, and governor have noted, demonstrations in defense of our immigrant neighbors have been overwhelmingly peaceful. Ignore the burning cars, ignore the rocks being thrown at Border Patrol cars as they go by, ignore the pieces of sidewalk and curb that have been broken up and have been thrown on law enforcement officers from an overpass. But what's she talking about here?
So I do think that part of what she is saying, there is validity to it. People do have the right to protest peacefully. But I think that what we need to address here is bringing in the National Guard is an escalation. 4,700 troops is more than we have in Syria fighting a terrorist organization of ISIS. That is not appropriate in L.A. when LAPD can handle it. This is not a small city.
But the LAPD said they were overwhelmed.
And that is fine, and that is something that the governor should talk to the LAPD about, and then if the governor feels the necessity to bring in the National Guard, he should do that. But I think that we need to separate out here what's happening. ICE should be able to do and deport illegal immigrants in a lawful manner under due process, and people in LA should be able to protest. And I do think that bringing in the National Guard escalated this situation. But I also think that we can all agree there are agitators here that come in on every protest, whether it's for Gaza, whether it's this, there are agitators that come in that really disrupt this and really take away from the peaceful protesting.
So Senator John Fetterman sees this through a completely different lens than the former vice president did. He said, quote, I unapologetically stand for free speech, peaceful demonstrations, and immigration. But this is not that. This is anarchy and true chaos. My party loses the moral high ground when we refuse to condemn setting cars on fire, destroying buildings, and assaulting law enforcement. I mean, to hear the Democrats on Capitol Hill talk about it, Jason, none of that happened.
No, and Senator Fetterman better be careful. They might kick him out of the Democratic caucus. I mean, that's not what you can say within the Democrat Party. And I think it's notable that we talk about Kamala Harris, who probably runs again in the future, because right now, with the Republican National Committee and others, we're tracking every Democrat who could possibly be running, whether it be the 26 midterms or in 28, who is saying something about these riots, who is standing up and actually defending these criminals. And guess what? Expect to see those in TV ads. One other quick point regarding President Trump. Part of the reason why he has to step in now and do this is to send a very clear message. So if anyone tries this in other cities, they're going to be stopped immediately with full force. That was a big part of the campaign, was to bring law and order back, as well as securing the border. So I'm glad the president's stepping up.
I just think we have to really come up with a real policy change here, and we need to figure out how to legislate immigration. And doing it through EO is not effective. We saw that with the Biden administration. We're seeing it with the Trump administration. Congress needs to do something and to have effective immigration reform here and actually do something, because you cannot dictate policy through executive order. It just is a pendulum that keeps switching, and then we end up in situations like this, which is not good for the American people.
All right, Jason.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.